Greetings my chess friends, I warmly welcome you to this little chess video, and we'll continue in our series of the Colle opening now. Before you say, oh no, we don't like the Colle, we don't play the Colle, we want to learn the Sicilian Dragon or some other awesome dynamic opening, well my chess friends, just chill out for 5 or 10 minutes, because even though you might not play this opening or these lines, there are some very good principles and ideas that we can learn and apply in a practical sense, whatever the opening is that we choose. Now I had it in my mind that I wasn't going to make any more opening videos because I thought their appeal was limited. But then I realised that the games themselves are quite instructive regardless of the opening choice. And I received some very positive comments from some contributors that were getting benefit from these videos due to the clear explanation of the ideas and principles involved. And especially one comment from one brother from India, Varun Kumar. And I thank you, Varun, for your kind comments and dedicate this little video to you, and I hope you can get something from it. So let us get into the Colle. Is d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, e3, bishop d3, c5, and we play c3, as if we are playing the semi-Slav with colours reversed. And that is one benefit of learning the Colle opening, is that you can play it with black as well as white, and it's simply the semi-Slav. So you can play it against d4 yourself. Bishop comes to e7 in this case. White castles, black castles, and you know the move, my dear chess friends? Yep, c5. Black takes on c5, and you know the move, yep, e4. Freeing our bishop that was entombed on c1. Now, black does not have to take this pawn on e4. And in this video, he is going to argue that he is going to take control of the e5 point. And he will debate with us whether we can enforce the move e5 ourselves, or whether he can enforce it. So he plays the move queen c7, the old main line, taking piece control of the square e5. Well, we're going to say we're going to enforce the move e5. We'd love to play the move e5, dislodging your king's knight, which is such a good defender of the black king side. Black prevents us with the move bishop to d6. Okay, we play rook to e1, saying, well, we're going to play e5 anyway. And then he essentially prevents us from playing e5 with the move knight to g4. Even if we kick the knight goes to e5, and we have been prevented from playing the move e5 ourselves. But it does not come without cost to black. Because after an exchange of knights, king's knights, black cannot avoid an isolated queen pawn after the move e takes d. And after e takes d, you can see, dear chess friends, that there is an isolated queen pawn on the board. Now this was for many years thought to give black easy equality. Okay, he's an isolated queen pawn, but he has two bishops, and his knight is in a good attacking position. And what white would do would simply retreat his bishop, and black would claim easy equality. It was championed by such chess players in the 1920s as Alexander Alekhine, former world champion, as giving black easy equality. Until that was a very famous chess player by the name of George Koltanowski. He played the Colle throughout his life, and his idea was to give up the bishop pair with the move knight to f3. And what he's going to argue is that this knight will prove to be a better piece in the siege of the d5 point than the light square bishops. And if he can swap off black's dark square bishop, then this knight will prove superior to black's light square bishop. So black takes the bishop. He has the advantage of two bishops. But when we are playing against an isolated queen pawn, and we are the side that is attacking it, we want to make exchanges anyway, because we realise that the more exchanges we make, if we reach an endgame, that this pawn on d5 is a potential weakness. So we welcome exchanges. And George Koltanowski was absolutely correct in his evaluation of this. Queen takes d3, hitting the isolated pawn. Black defends this pawn with queen to c6. And this is a very instructive move, bishop to e3. We cannot attack the pawn right away, but the way we play against an isolated queen pawn is to blockade the square in front of the pawn. Because a target that cannot move is easier to hit than a mobile one. So we make sure, first and foremost, that this pawn cannot move. In this game, h6 was played, and we put more pressure on the isolated queen pawn. Rook to d8. This, of course, indirectly defends the pawn. We simply cannot take it because there's a check on h2. And black so far has successfully defended the isolated queen pawn, but we're still laying siege to it. We blockade the pawn with bishop to d4. b6 was tried, and this is an absolutely excellent move, bishop to e5. Because it's very important in this kind of position to exchange the dark square bishops. Because black not only loses the advantage of the bishop pair, but in the struggle for the d5 point, our knight will prove superior to the white bishop on c8. And this was George Koltanowski's argument. This is why he thankfully allowed, the exchange of his own light square bishop. And you'll see that this is in fact what transpires. Bishop takes, rook takes, bishop to e6, and knight to d4. And you can see, dear chess friends, that our knight on d4 is superior to the light square bishop of black. It is an attacking piece, whereas black's light square bishop is purely defensive and ultimately passive. Queen d6, rook to d1. Sorry, rook to e1, I beg your pardon. Rook e8. And because of the strong position of this knight on d4, white can in fact win a pawn. Knight takes e6, f takes e6, queen to g6. And there's no way that black can defend the e6 pawn. Rook comes to f8. And rook takes e6. Rook to f2, rook to e2, and rooks are exchanged. And black has some weaknesses here. The main problem for him is that his king cannot come into the centre to protect the isoloni, the pawn on d5. And you will see that white uses this to his advantage. Because of the active position of the rook, black's king can never cross the e-file. And what white will in fact do is bring his king behind the rook up to d4, and in conjunction with the rook put so much pressure on the isolated queen pawn that this pawn will fall. And you will see that this transpires. Why should we in fact trade one of our healthy pawns for one of black's weak pawns? Well, of course we should not. And that is why white played c4. e6. White carries out his idea. And here we are prepared to exchange because it creates further weakness for black. King d3, king f5. Rook e4, and white has successfully won, or can potentially win, the isoloni, which is now on d4. I will just go through the rest of the game because it's quite instructive in itself. Rook to e6. And here white allows some counterplay, but the pawn on e4 d4 falls, and he now has created two unopposed passed pawns on the queen side and has essentially a winning position. Takes. And I don't think there's anything in heaven or on earth that can prevent these pawns, at least one of these pawns, from reaching promotion. And in this position, black in fact resigned. So if we go back to the beginning, chess friends, we'll just recap on these ideas. We argue over the e5 point. We'd like to play e5. Black tries to prevent it, eventually does prevent it, but at the cost of getting an isolated queen pawn. And we play George Koltanowski's idea. Prepare to argue that our knight will prove to be a better piece than black's light squared bishop. And we make preparations. We first of all blockade the pawn, and eventually exchange off the dark square bishop, reaching this position, proving that our knight is a stronger piece than the light squared bishop. So that concludes our little video on the Colle. I hope you found that rather instructive. I certainly did when I was going over the game. And it's important to try and, of course, remember these ideas that we can apply them in our own games. And I sincerely hope that you can do that. So thank you very, very much for watching this little chess video. And suffice to say that I sincerely wish you well with your own chess. Take care and goodbye.